The worst atrocities in human history happened not because the broader population outside of the governments had any deep resentment towards the people that were being persecuted, but more so because they turned an increasingly blind eye towards the explicit prejudice against such people. This is why it's so important that we remain on guard about the pendulum of our reaction to past injustices swinging too far the other way, because then we end up perpetuating the cycle of resentment and injustice that we are trying to address. I'd like to read to you a quote by Viktor E. Frankl, who was a survivor of the World War II Nazi concentration camps, and it goes, quote, "Certainly, it was a considerable achievement for a guard or a foreman to be kind to a prisoner in spite of the camp's influences. And on the other hand, the baseness of a prisoner who treated his own companions badly was exceptionally contemptible. Obviously, the prisoners found the lack of character in such men especially upsetting, while they were profoundly moved by the smallest kindness received from any of the guards. I remember how one day a foreman secretly gave me a piece of bread which I knew he must have saved from his breakfast ration. It was far more than the small piece of bread which moved me to tears at that time. It was the human something which this man also gave to me, the word and look which accompanied the gift. From all this we may learn that there are two races of people in this world, but only two races: the race of the decent man and the race of the indecent man. Both are found everywhere. They penetrate into all groups of society." End quote. There are only two groups of people, the decent and the indecent. I think this point deserves highlighting, underlining, capitalizing, because it really reminds us that regardless of the race, regardless of the political party, or the opinions, or their relation or proximity to us, an individual should always be judged by their own individual qualities and not by whatever group we might want to associate them with. I want to read another paragraph where he really hones in on that point. He says, quote, "No group consists entirely of decent or indecent people. In this sense, no group is of pure race, and therefore one occasionally found a decent fellow among the camp guards. Life in a concentration camps tore open the human soul and exposed its depth. Is it surprising that in those depths, again, we found only human qualities which in their very nature were a mixture of good and evil? The rift dividing good from evil, which goes through all human beings, reaches into the lowest depths and becomes apparent even on the bottom of the abyss, which is laid open by the concentration camps." I think it was so powerfully moving because it really highlights this capacity for humans to be either good or evil, or good and evil. All too often, we see people hankering to identify with a certain group of people just so they can vilify another group of people. Identifying with a group seems to offer us a sense of security, which in an evolutionary sense makes sense. Gone are the days when we used to not know who was across the hills, and we used to be protective necessarily of our group and wary of whoever we were not familiar with. Now we are all too familiar with the people, the culture, the language, everything about other people that we have never met before are right at our fingertips. These tribal instincts that were once a feature in the way that we interacted with each other have now become a bug in our system. This is such a critical thing for us to recognize and moderate in ourselves, just like we try to recognize and moderate every other deficiency, imperfection that we have as humans, whether that be jealousy or envy. We always try to attenuate these things because they are not always optimal when trying to deal with other people. The most unfortunate thing about such tribal instincts that drives us to other people and to form our own group and to idolize that group that we're in is just how subtle it is. Subtle because of how difficult it is to recognize that behavior, and also because even when we do recognize it, it's very difficult not to ignore because of the cultural zeitgeist that enables that type of prejudice in the first place. Our culture often enables us to perceive certain types of people, certain groups of people, as more worthy of condemnation than others. In these times, for example, the people who we often ignore or excuse prejudicial behavior that is displayed towards them are people like whites, men, Christians, Jews of late, and the list goes on and on. And a lot of this behavior, it must be noted, is no different from any other form of bigotry that has been encountered in human history. The worst atrocities in human history happened not because the broader population outside of the governments had any deep resentment towards the people that were being persecuted, but more so because they turned an increasingly blind eye towards the explicit prejudice against such people. This is why it's so important that we remain on guard about the pendulum of our reaction to past injustices swinging too far the other way, because then we end up perpetuating the cycle of resentment and injustice that we are trying to address. I think the solution needs to be more idea-based. Instead of targeting people with our judgment, we need to instead target ideas. Ideas are what makes a person good or evil. It is the manifestations of these ideas that does that. And so by not targeting the person, we are allowing the person the opportunity to be able to adapt to whatever information we want to present them or whatever information the world wants to present them without making them to feel as though they are already condemned simply for having that idea. And we also give ourselves that opportunity as well. We also admit our humility in the fact that we could just as easily be wrong, and the only way to correct for such errors is by exposing our ideas to other people and letting other people to expose their ideas to us. The only alternative to that free flow and encouragement of shared ideas is violence in the long run. And I think we can all agree that that is an unpalatable solution for all of us, especially with the devastating weapons that technology has put in our hands. Not to mention all of the known and unknown side effects of other technologies like social media. For all of human history, the stupidity of humanity put us on a tightrope that did not threaten any more than a few groups of people. We do not have that luxury anymore. The stakes are now on a global level, and the only solution is in our ability to exchange ideas with each other and in our ability to moderate our natural instincts. It might be difficult, it might seem impossible, but there is no other option.